Welcome back to the Rugby Rundown, our weekly news show with Jan de Koning. And Jan, the Bulls finally confirmed the news of 7 new signings, or 8, I think. Most importantly of them, Curwin Bosch. And you and I had raised an eyebrow a month ago when we first heard about this. What's your take on that?
Well, the fact that we knew that it was most likely going to happen, so I can't say I'm surprised. Maybe puzzled still, but also then again, I mean, there's such great examples, and I think the one thing I want to touch on, I'll get to that now, is the reason why I think this might just be a good thing for the Bulls, and why it's not such a bad thing. You mentioned that he, Bath wanted him, so that already tells you that it's not just the Bulls that saw something in him. And we know his problems he had at the Sharks. He dropped down in a pecking order, and he didn't feel comfortable at fullback, and now suddenly he comes back and he's a fullback come fly off. But I think the example I want to use is Percy Montgomery. Percy Montgomery was just as vilified when he was in South Africa, and he was already a Springbok, but the people, he's one of those players that people love to hate. And then Percy went away, played for Newport, and he came back a far more mature player, and he became South Africa's biggest point scorer of all time. So he came back a different player, and sometimes these players has got obvious talent. I mean, we know they've got talent. They're just not living up to their promise, or the early promise. And I think this could be another case. I don't want to say he's the next Percy Montgomery, but I think this could be a classic case of a player that had to go away, go learn something from other coaches, play in a different competition, experience a different culture, and now come back. Now he might just be that classic player. And I think the Bulls, we all know that Willie is not going to go on forever. So Willie le Roux is going to be, by the way, we must speak about Willie le Roux just now as well. But Willie le Roux is going to go away. So you need somebody for that utility, fullback, playmaker role. So I think this could be a very astute signing by the Bulls.
Yeah, that's interesting because Bath has Finn Russell as their first choice, and we have the Bulls, have Andre Pollard. And both of these teams looking for a backup, call it that, someone who can play when Andre or Finn is not available due to international duty for whatever reason. And Curwin seems to be the one that they want to press the button on. The question about Curwin's always been his defense. He was always seen to be a little light on defense in the 10 channel. Do you think that might have improved? He looks to me, some of the pictures I saw, like he might have bulked up a little bit maybe. I don't know. It's difficult to say at a distance, but do you think the defense might have been sorted over there? Because that French league is tough.
We will only know once he gets back, but there's ways to manage that. I mean, we know that Willie still got his detractors, and people will tell you he can't tackle. That's irrelevant. It's what else he brings. And a good coach, and I think Ackerman is that type of coach, a good coach will find a way. And there's a litany of examples of really good fly halves that could hide away, that could good coaches could hide them away on defense. You just put a flank in that channel when the opposition's got the ball, or you do, and they won't run at that channel, and you can go cover at fullback. So there's lots of ways of masking that, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean in a good way, that he can mask his deficiencies and then utilize his greatness in other ways.
Yeah. Now, the question you just mentioned, that he wasn't happy playing 15. The Bulls have a problem at 15. David Kriel's left. Willie le Roux, like you said, is coming to the end of his career. Devin Williams seems to be out of favor slightly. I don't know. I think there's a couple of question marks about his defense, come to think of it. We saw Kurtley Arendse playing fullback this past weekend. Isn't there a danger of Curwin ending up at 15 again, like Bhutto ended up at 15 several times for the little bit, short period of time that he played for the Bulls? Isn't that another risk maybe? Because there's a problem there.
Yeah, I think, and it's my opinion. I mean, I haven't had the privilege of sitting down with Johan Ackerman to ask him directly about this, but I would think that utility role, that can play fly off, that can play fullback, that can play wing, but can come in a creative role. So a good coach, again, and I'm going to say this repeatedly, and people will get ad nauseum, will get tired of me, but a good coach will find a way of working with that player and making him understand that his value is not necessary in just playing fly. Even if he prefers to play fly, he can be a good player and coming in a first receiver role when you the game is flowing. You don't have to do from static ball. You don't have to do it from. And the other thing that we have to mention is that Kevin has a decent boot on him, a pretty decent boot. And you mentioned a couple of the other guys, and that left boot is invaluable in certain conditions. So I think there are enough good that I can see in him that will tell me that there's a reason why Johan Ackermann picked him. And Johan will give him a few hugs and he'll feel much better about playing at fullback.
Sorry, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so the other option at fullback is obviously going to be Takir Abrams that they've now signed. He's at wing and at fullback. A lacquer back, as we call them, a scrum cap wearing, swiveling hip kind of a thing, small guy. He also went overseas, played in France and then played at Munster. Didn't get that many opportunities at Munster, but, did he learn something over there? What's the benefit of signing him, do you think?
I think what I saw of him in France is he's attacking. And again, there's another player where people say, oh, maybe his defense is not so lacquer. That's fine. Again, and I'll say this again and again, a good coach will find a way of dealing with that. Maybe they send him to tackle school every week or whatever he does with the guy. He will find a way of fixing whatever shortcomings. I mean, you can go look at players under Ackermann at the Lions. They were discarded at other years. I mean, Harold Foster was thrown away from the Bulls, went to the Lions, and he became a really good center, one of the best. So I mean, don't want to go too much into the past, but Johannes got a habit and a way of dealing with these things. So I would say Takir as well. I think Munster probably is a playing style. Maybe he didn't suit. They like big bruising players. They like their wings to be 6'6" and 200 kilos and running. They want Jonah Lomas on the wing. They don't want Cheslin Colby's and Takir Abrams on the wing. So I think that's probably why he didn't get as much game time.
On Friday, when I was there for the team announcement, I was talking to you on outside, and I said I saw that morning on social media somewhere a screenshot of the team for 2017, the Lions team. And I mean, their names in there: Franco Mostert, Kwagga Smith, Malcolm Marx. I mean, if you look at it back now, where those players went and what they became, let's give credit where credit is due. Johan knows how to put a team together. I mean, this is actually, regardless of what the Bull supporters say, this is a good omen, I think.
I have a good feeling about what's happening. Johan, a good coach, and I hope people get the context here. A good coach is a good manager, or a good manager is a good coach. You need to be a player management, a man management type of person. And I know Jake White, and I don't think he will take offense, but Jake White was sometimes a bit old school, too old school and too rough for the modern players, I mean, I remember, and now I'm going to go really far back. I remember Alex Wiley coaching at Transvaal, and even those guys from Joburg couldn't handle that. They don't like a coach to arrive inebriated at the field and start swearing at them. So those days are gone. So you're dealing with a modern player where you need to be a bit more careful about how you treat these people on and off the field. And I think Ackermann knows exactly what he's doing. We all know him as a really hard, tough lock and a good Springbok lock and a really good player at the Bulls and stuff. But I just think as a personality, and I think maybe MBS, sorry if I don't want to put religion into them, but Johan is based in Christianity, and I've liked the way that he was open about it. And to me, that says he's got a sound foundation in where he works from. And once you've got that, if you understand how to deal with people, that personality that you speak with, the type of person that he is, when he then speaks to you one-on-one, or he tells you something that you're doing wrong, you will listen, because he doesn't have to shout and swear at you. He's going to look you in the eyes and tell you, Jan, not again. And you will know that he means business. So I think that's the beauty about Johan Ackermann. And look, I mean, maybe I was privileged to sit in a few press conferences with him, and I understand his personality, but I just think his base, his grounding is super, and that's what makes him such a good man manager.
One of the people I look up to, during my life, a guy like Richard Branson, who always used to say that he's successful because he surrounded himself with people who are smarter than he is, or better at certain things than he is. And I think Johan is a classic example of that. Neil the Brain coming in has made a huge difference. Jean Tiede is an excellent defense coach. Werner Creer is an excellent scrum coach. The conditioning, everybody else, everybody around them, you can see that. And I saw for myself that week I was with the Bulls how good a man manager Johan Ackermann actually is. And I also saw I've seen the growth that Johan has undergone since he took the job. I saw him that first day and he was like a deer in the headlights. What happened? And it was a big job and it was a bit overwhelming, and now he's grown into it now that he's found his feet, and look where the Bulls are, potentially on track for a home semi-final if things go the way we want them to go.
I agree with you. No, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, before we go on, I mean, here's Johan. We talk about Johan and the players he's getting in, and we touched earlier on Willie Leroux. And we can't go not mentioning Willie. On Saturday, he will play his 400th first-class game. That's insane. If you think, and Willie is one of those players, just like Takira's going to have his detractors. It's like Kerwin Bosch has his detractors. Willie's got a lot of detractors. But those are people, I believe, that don't understand the game. If you've watched Willie Leroux, I mean, I want to take you back to the 2019 World Cup final. That play that set up Mapimpi's try. The drifting. I mean, the play was going on the right-hand side of the field, and suddenly you see Willie drifting. It's like he's drifting away from the place, and the next minute the ball comes back, and there's Willie setting up a play, and Am kicked a grubber and collected it, and I mean not the grubber, it was a chip kick that went, and Am collected it and offloaded to Mapimpi, and that setup was the vision that Willie had 4 or 5 seconds earlier. While the play was going on, everybody else was seeing it, and something I did an article earlier that went live today. His vision of reading shifting defenses. That's the best phrase to use. His vision to read shifting defenses. The moment he did that, he knew where the space was going to be because he saw the defense move, and that beauty of that reading the game. And I think people underestimate that. So, am I a Willie Leroux fan? Massive fan, but because of the sheer brazen talent. When I saw him first, I quoted Eugene Eloff, who was a guy who found him in France. He was looking for a fly off at Boland. 2011, he's looking for a fly off at Boland. Somebody said, there's a young guy in France that wants to come back to South Africa. And then Eugene looked at a couple of videos of Willie and he said, that's the guy I want. He said to Willie, carte blanche, you do what you do. That season, 2011, Boland scored average of 7 tries per match. And in the final, when they beat the EP Elephants, I can't even remember, they were still called EP Elephants or EP Kings or whatever they were called back then. A team that had Luke Watson and players like that in. They put more than 40 points past the EP team and scored 9 tries. And that was Willie at fly-off. So if people ever want to wonder why Willie can play fly-off, he started out as a fly-off with great vision. Moved to fullback, played on the wing, but that vision didn't leave him. And he uses that vision. That's why he can come into the first receiver role and create and sometimes do overlaps and do passes and do kicks. They don't all come off. But more than often than not, in the big moments, they do come off.
On that subject tonight, Paul Roos is honouring Willie Leroux. We're also talking to Edgar Rathbone later today, and he's going to attend that. So I'm aware of it. So well done, Willie. I mean, what an exceptional player. Like you said, 400 matches is insane. I mean, we thought Dion Fourie played a lot of matches. Willie Leroux is even better. So even more. So yeah, that's what. So I'm going to put the link to your article on Rugby 365 down in the description if people want to go read it. So it's a very good article. Thank you. Let's get back to the Bulls signings. They seem to have raided the Sharks a little bit. Quite a few of the Sharks players coming across. The most important one of those is a prop to replace Wilco Louw. I don't really know much about him. What do you know? Let me just find his name again because I cannot remember it ever. But one day, Ndanda, probably I'll remember it in the future quite a bit more because I'm sure that they signed him with a reason. What do you know about him?
As much as you do. I actually saw his name and I had to go research what he. So it's one of those players. And I want to go back to what I said much earlier about Johan Ackermann. Here's a player who nobody knows much about. He's on the fringes, and Johan Ackermann says he's not getting enough game time. I like what that player's got. And we must remember he turned a number of props into Springboks at the Lions. He sees things in players that other people don't see. And he can bring the best out of them. So if Johan Ackerman likes that player, I think that's a good player. I think for me, the player that I know a bit more about, but also very interesting, is Gillemere. That's also a very interesting signing, because now suddenly you got another playmaker in the mix. That's why I think that going forward, when Andre Pollard's not available and Villiers decided to move on, and finally, when he's played 500 games somewhere, I don't know, maybe he comes back to Boland and finishes his career at Boland. But that's a joke. So once that happens, you've got really good players like Bosch and Gillemere that can fill that gap, domestic level or URC level, especially those early season games when you need some really good creative players. And when you play in Pretoria on a December on a Saturday afternoon at 3:00 and it's 35 degrees, you need a player like that understands it and that can run and mesmerize the opposition. So I think it's some very astute signings. Some teams, and I think, and I don't mean to disparage the Sharks here, but when they took over, when the new owners, American owners, took over, they went for high profile. They've now admitted that maybe that approach was not the best approach. Sometimes those high profile players don't work for you because they're just never available.
Yeah.
And when they're available, they're injured. So like you look at Evan Etzebeth, what a wonderful player, what a great ambassador for the game and for South African rugby and Springbok rugby. The most capped Springbok of all time. Double World Cup winner. I mean, you can say everything you like. One thing is, when he was at the Stormers, he played more for the Springboks than he played for the Stormers. Now at the Sharks, he's playing more for the Springboks than he's playing at the Stormers.
At the Sharks.
And that's because he gives so much for the Springboks and for South Africa, for his country, that he carries some of that bruising and battered body into his domestic. And then that's when he doesn't get enough time, because now he's playing 12 months a year. And even though they say he's supposed to have this 6 weeks or 8 weeks in February and March is not enough, because he first of all, he's got to rest for 3 weeks, proper rest before, and then he can start with the gym work. So by the time he gets back, he still hasn't built up all the recovery. So, and that's a problem with a lot of Springboks. So to get back to Johan Ackerman, that's why it's an astute signings, because these are players that play for him and he can build him up during the times when his Springboks are not available.
Yeah, that's an important point. They are Springbok quality, almost not quite there, maybe not there yet, or they have been there, like Andre Liebenberg, but they will be available. That's the most important thing. Then they will stay available. You don't have to, like we said last year, Johan joined in what was it, June, and he only met his Springboks for the first time somewhere in November, I think, if I remember correctly. I mean, that's ridiculous.
December. Was December when he had his
after the November.
I remember asking him. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I remember asking the question at the press conference, what is it like finally having all your Springboks here? I remember that was the first, ironically, the first day that they were arrived at Loftus, and he said, I finally could say hello to them and shake their hands,
Yeah.
That's the sad reality of it. So that puts it into context, So, I mean, another classic example is Marcel Coetzee, he was there already when Johan arrived. But you talk about Arno, I mean,
Andrew.
that Arno is going to be available for you. Andrew, sorry.
Andrew.
I'm talking about. Apologies. So Andrew, is going to be available in all those games. So you've got all that experience around those young guys. And Marcel, maybe things didn't always work out in the beginning, in the early stages, but eventually they settled down. And now that Johannes had these players and he's learned a bit more about Marcel, now they're a good combination, and that's what you do. I mean, I know that I was critical of Johan when why he didn't, why he picked Marcel as his captain. When you already had a club captain, we spoke about it, and the reality was the same. Another classic example was we had Tiaan, 1995, Tiaan Strauss. We had Tiaan Strauss, who was probably the best number 8 in the country. And we had Frans Opino, who was going to be the Springbok captain. And Keith Christie admitted, he said, I had to choose between my captain or Tiaan, there would be a conflict in the team if I picked Tiaan. That doesn't make Tiaan a bad person. It doesn't make... Keith selected who he thought was going to be the best for the team, or what was going to be the best for the team. And that's what he selected, and that's what served him well. I mean, we won the World Cup. You can argue all you like about Tiaan Strauss, and I do believe he was the best number 8 at the time. But unfortunately, Kitch felt that wasn't going to suit the team. He needed a Frans Opino to win the World Cup, and that's what he got.
Yeah, and 4 years later, Tiaan Strauss won the World Cup with Australia with the worst Australian accent ever. So, anyway, that's a story for
Yeah.
another day. Interestingly enough, what I really like about Andre Liebenberg is he took absolutely no nonsense from our little friend Henry Pollock this weekend, and that little
Yeah.
white fringe of his, I really enjoyed that little interaction. Thank you, Andrew. We all wanted to do that. Even Dwayne Vermeulen wanted to make a comeback to rugby just to go sort this little guy out. What did you see there?
Yeah, yeah, because he is a bit. Look, I mean, I've seen that, and let's talk about Pollard. The chap's obviously got very good talent. He's got enormous talent, but he's believing his own hype at the moment. People like the fact that he was celebrating, and yes, I know it's a new era. People like the soccer celebrations, and the pressure and whatever gestures you want to show. So maybe I'm old school, and I'm never going to change. I just don't like that sort of wild celebrations. I remember and I don't want to go off the topic. I'll come back to Pollard now. When the Stormers has played, I think they played the Bulls at Newlands. They were still at Newlands, and one of the centers intercepted the ball and ran through and scored. And the next minute he did some really fancy, I think it's the Macarena or some dance behind the poles, some really fancy dance. And everybody jumped and celebrated, and it was a great try. And Dobson said afterwards, when I saw the dance, I knew we were going to lose this game, because you could see the attitude of the players. Now, coming back to Pollard, he's clearly a very talented player, and he's got a personality. And you want personalities. You don't want robots in the game. You want personalities. But there's a limit to what you can do. And at the weekend, the exact incident that you talked about is, the whistle is blown, and then he still start pushing players forward, and then run around and like gesture and the scrum off, even the scrum off bumped, and he pushed the scrum off, and then suddenly it was all on, and they wanted to. I promise you, if there wasn't 600 cameras on the ground, that would have been a immediate ruck, and Pollard would have got up with a bloody nose or something.
Pollock, yeah, Jan, Pollock.
Sorry, Pollard.
Just so people don't get confused, we're not talking about Andre Pollard here.
No, I'm talking about the blonde head that's not a Springbok. It never will be a Springbok.
Never will be a Springbok. Thank goodness for that. I'm like you. I'm old school. I don't like that kind of attitude, that like cockiness. It's going to get beaten out of him one day soon, I'm sure, where we can't see it under the dark, where it's really dark, right under there. Anyway, let's just go finish talking about the rest of the signings. Hakeem Kunene, another fullback. Dylan Mart, Stormers, I know, tried very hard. I know what the Bulls had to do to get him, and it's not as much. We definitely didn't offer him double. I know that for a fact. And then at this Puma center, Sangu Khamlashi, I don't know anything about him. I think it's an outside center. But I'm more worried about the number 12 position, the inside center. Jan Serfontein, retired 2 years prematurely, 2 years before the expiry of his contract. Anything about the plans for the Bulls there that you know of? I mean, I expected something more maybe in terms of signings. That seems to me to be a bit of a problem.
Well, as far as I know, Harold Foster is not going anywhere. He's not going to go play for the Springboks, so he's available.
Yeah, but he's one guy.
So no, I know. No, I'm joking. I think Khamlashi, and I'm talking under correction. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But didn't he play for Griquas first and then went to the Cheetahs?
I have no idea. He plays for Pumas now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then he went from Cheetahs to the Pumas, or maybe just Cheetahs and Pumas. But that's what happened with a lot of those players. They go to Jimmy and Nelspruit, and they get really good game time. They get good exposure, and then the people can see their qualities. Because remember, at some stage they will play Currie Cup against these big teams, and you will see them against quality players, and then you can say, okay, this guy's got some qualities. I can work with him. So yeah, who knows? And knowing Ackerman, he might be the player that he turns into an inside center. He might have the qualities that second playmaker at inside center.
I bumped into Stephen Gans on Friday as well at Loftus, and I started talking to him about, does he prefer 12 or 13? He says he doesn't care. He loves both positions. He'll play in both of those positions, even though he is an inside center more or outside center. I can't remember which one, but he loves either. He just wants to play. That's the biggest thing. Yeah. And the Bulls signed a couple of other players. Dimitri Rasmus, for example, I had a chat with him as well. I've spoken to Gigan Johannes. He played fly-off again for the under-23s. So there's the pantry is actually quite full quite exciting. But then they,
Yeah.
Curtly Arends are leaving, and the likes. Yeah, there is a bit of an exodus, but good replacements coming in. I'm happy with the place where the Bulls are at. Your overall impression, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's good signings. I think it's a good indication as to where they're heading. There's enough young talent coming through. They're signing enough young players and some senior players, and that's always that balance of getting one or two senior players that can guide these youngsters. That's got experience of having played overseas. That's where Kerwin Bosch could be really valuable. He could be the Willie Leroux mentor type role. He can really give these young players some advice that will help them down the line. So, I mean, I remember, and just to get to your point about the under 23s, I know that I did an article about whether the Lions are maybe doing Pete a disservice and opening the door for somebody to, because I know that the Stormers are interested in him, and I know that the Sharks are interested in him. But he's still got another a year on his contract. But if he's not playing for the URC team, he might get frustrated. And when a good offer comes, he might say, listen, I don't want to be here anymore. And, you can only hold onto a player for so long. If you're eventually going to lose him, you might as well let him go. So, yeah, I know that the Lions took him on tour, but he still hasn't seen any game time. So he's still sitting in the stands with he hasn't even got a tracksuit on. He sits with a blazer in the stand. There will be a level of frustration. But if he plays under 23, at least he's getting game time, and he's staying active, and that's the big challenge, and that's what is good about the under 23. Unfortunately, there's only the final left, but I think some players got some extra game time during the latter stages of the URC.
All right. Okay, enough about the Bulls now. I want to talk about the Cheetahs a little bit, but before we do that, just remember Jan's got his own channel, Rugby Unfiltered. You can see it there behind him, loud and proud. Make sure I'll put the link down the bottom. We also have a collab. You can click on it, go subscribe to his channel, follow his podcast with Loffe Elof that he referred to earlier. Also, if you want to make sure that you don't miss any of our episodes, sign up to our WhatsApp channel. The details down in the description below. So if you publish a video, you get notified by WhatsApp and not by YouTube, because YouTube doesn't tell anybody that the video is coming out. So make sure you do that. And while you're at it, please subscribe to both our channels. So thank you, Jan, for doing this with us. We appreciate it. The Cheetahs managed to pull this one out of the fire. Qualify for the Currie Cup, but that was touch and go there for a bit.
It's quite sad. It's both funny and quite sad that their future, the future of a lot of players and even the coaching staff, hinged on a conversion kick, a missed conversion kick. Because if that conversion kick went over, the Cheetahs would have been out of the Currie Cup. And who knows what would have happened. And Frans Steyn admitted it on more than one occasion, that if they don't qualify for the Currie Cup, they have no guarantee that they will have a job the next day. So misconversion, and now they're playing in the semi-finals of the SA Cup, and they've qualified for the Currie Cup. So they can start building again. There's a bit of hope, but we know it's tough in Bloemfontein. I mean, the economy in general is in the dumps, and Bloemfontein hasn't got the biggest economy. They've got a good support, rural support base. Farmers and that sort of stuff, and there's some businessmen. Somebody asked me the other day if I still know whether Trotskys are, Boet Trotsky and his, whether they still support the Cheetahs, and I don't think they're alive anymore.
No, they're not.
So,
yeah, it's not to make you laugh about, but that's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, so people want to know where are they, why they, and that's the reality. Is those kind of supporters that made sure that the benefactors is a better name. The benefactors that made sure the Cheetahs had money in the bank, they're no longer there. So that's why recently they had to go and reach into or beg from the, it's almost like having those car boats at the robots, go stand at the robot with the car boat. I need to support my kids. I've got a wife and 4 kids, or 10 wives and 100 kids, or whatever. Please, I need some money. And that's what they did. They got 10 separate companies that bailed them out. So hopefully now they can get body support. They've got, and hopefully I don't know if the URC thing is going to materialize, because I mean we also got that a Black Lion from Georgia that's put their hands up for a possible URC place, and we know there's a English club, a team that's interested in joining the URC, although that might be a stretch too far. I'm not sure if it's wise to take a second division English club into the URC.
No.
We might go the way of we had the Sunwolves in Japan. Everybody has to trip out there to Japan every now and then to go play a game, and it's, it just becomes too cumbersome. So, but yeah, hopefully the Cheetahs get a look in either Super Rugby or URC, and they finally get to build a proper future. And I know that I won't be popular at SA Rugby, but they really treated the Cheetahs like the stepchild, the bad stepchild, and Cheetahs got done on more, because the Cheetahs were the ones that started opening their door by going to play in the Pro 14. They did a lot of work there, and then SA Rugby stepped in and sorted everything out, and now we're in the URC, and it's a European competition. So I just felt, or still feel, that maybe we owe the Cheetahs a big debt of gratitude, and definitely some assistance to make sure they don't disappear, because they were on the brink, or they are on the brink of disappearing if they don't improve, and they keep losing players because they just don't have the money. There's no finances in Bloemfontein that can compete. Even, I mean, when Kimberley and Nelspruit has bigger budgets than Bloemfontein, then there's a problem.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. Okay. Right. Let's talk about the All Blacks quickly. The greatest rivalry to the end of the year, or later in this year. I mean, it's building up to it. And Dave Rennie been appointed. That's a big thing. I think it's a bad thing for South Africa, because he knows how to beat us. We talked about this before. He beat us with the Australians. I mean, really, even with Snorgate, when Faf de Klerk touched, what's his name, mustache there?
Nick White's
mustache. Yeah, but the point is, Dave Rennie is the one guy we didn't want the All Blacks coach to be, and he is now. So that's a problem. And now Graham Henry is going to be involved there as well as a selector. That's an interesting thing. I didn't even know they have selectors anymore. How does that work? I mean, that's actually, they getting back together.
I think, I think they've always had selectors, but I think those selectors are more like advisors. I mean, they will sit around with him and he'll say, this is why I want this player, these players, and maybe they have an influence. I'm not exactly quite sure, because I mean, we're not privy to their boardroom discussions. But I know that they've always had selectors. It's the one thing we until a few years ago, until Rassie came back and took over, we had also had a selection panel for the Springboks. I think under Alistair, we still had a selection. I think Peter Jooste was still head of the selection panel in some form or another. So it's very interesting. I think Graham Henry will do more than just selecting a few teams. He might be standing on the sideline, casting an eagle eye over the All Blacks, and maybe whisper in a few ears, because he's been around the block a few times.
Yeah, he won a World Cup, make no mistake. I mean, he's like you said, he knows how to do things. Now, I'm excited. I can't wait for this All Black tour to start. I mean, it's going to probably be the highlight, apart from the World Cup next year, but the highlight of the rugby season. And it's going to be every 4 years. Can't wait for that. So, yeah, anyway, Jan, we've talked about the Bulls mostly, but we've run out of time. So thank you for making time for me. Appreciate it, as always. And we had a bit of a couple of things happening in our lives that put a pay to some episodes in the recent past. But all sorted out now. All settled in and back to normal.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's always a pleasure, Mbia. I love chatting rugby. And, yeah, let's keep going and let's keep growing.